Well, listen, if you don't have anything to say, you blab. You just go on and 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 on.
Voters do not agree with these despicable women on The View. They are wildly out of touch with the vast majority of Americans, and frankly, they should seek immediate help.
The lights were bright, the cameras were rolling, and for a split second, just a split second, the entire world seemed to hold its breath. Because what started as a routine daytime segment instantly spiraled into one of the most talked about on-air clashes in recent television history, and nobody, not the producers, not the audience, not even the hosts themselves, was ready for how fast things would escalate between Karoline Leavitt and Whoopi Goldberg. It began like any other conversation, polished smiles, controlled tones, and that familiar rhythm of back and forth that viewers had seen 1,000 times before. But underneath it all, there was tension. Not subtle tension. The kind that hums beneath the surface, waiting for the exact wrong word at the exact wrong moment. And then it happened. One comment. One line delivered with absolute confidence. And suddenly, the atmosphere cracked. Because when Whoopi leaned forward, voice steady but unmistakably sharp, and challenged Karoline in a way that felt less like debate and more like dismissal, the room didn't just react, it froze. The audience shifted. The co-hosts glanced at each other. Something had changed. But what nobody expected, what absolutely nobody saw coming, was what Karoline did next. No hesitation. No stutter. No attempt to soften the moment. Just a calm, measured response that hit with the precision of someone who had been waiting for that exact opening. And in that instant, the dynamic flipped. The host who had controlled countless conversations suddenly wasn't in control anymore. The guest who was expected to react was now leading. Social media didn't just notice, it exploded. Clips started circulating before the segment even ended. Viewers rewound, replayed, dissected every word, every expression, every pause. Because this wasn't just another heated exchange. This felt like a moment. The kind that doesn't fade. The kind that divides audiences, sparks debates, and ignites reactions from every corner of the internet. And the most shocking part? That was only the beginning. Because behind the scenes, insiders are now hinting that what happened on camera was just a fraction of what really went down, and if those whispers are even half true, then what we saw live was just the surface of something much bigger. The moment that response left Karoline Leavitt's mouth, something in the studio shifted so sharply it was almost audible. You could feel it. Not tension, the kind everyone expected, but something heavier. Something irreversible. Because this wasn't just a clapback. This was a calculated dismantling, delivered with a calm that made it 10 times more devastating. And for the first time in a very long time, Whoopi Goldberg didn't immediately regain control. She paused. Just for a second. But in live television, 1 second might as well be a lifetime. Karoline didn't raise her voice. She didn't interrupt. She didn't even lean forward aggressively. Instead, she leaned back, slightly, and let the silence stretch just long enough to make everyone uncomfortable. Then she started laying it out. Not opinions. Not emotional reactions. Facts. Numbers. Specifics. The kind of details that don't just challenge a narrative, they corner it. And as she spoke, the expressions around the table began to change. At first, it was subtle. A slight tightening of the jaw from one co-host. A quick glance exchanged between producers behind the camera. A shift in posture from Whoopi herself. Because what Karoline was doing wasn't playing the game. She was rewriting it in real time. According to what multiple insiders later claimed, this wasn't spontaneous at all. One alleged production assistant, who later posted anonymously, insisted that Karoline had arrived over-prepared, carrying notes she never even had to look at. She didn't need them, the source claimed. She already knew exactly what she was going to say if things went left. And things went left faster than anyone expected. As Karoline continued, she began referencing prior statements, on-air comments, past interviews, even moments that longtime viewers would recognize instantly. She wasn't just responding, she was connecting dots. Dots that weren't supposed to be connected. And that's when the energy in the room shifted again. Because now it wasn't just about one comment. It was about a pattern. A narrative. And whether that narrative could hold up under pressure. Whoopi attempted to interject, just briefly, but Karoline didn't bulldoze her. She did something far more unsettling. She waited. Let Whoopi speak. Then responded directly to every point. Clean. Precise. Unrushed. And suddenly, the rhythm Whoopi had mastered for years, the interrupt, redirect, dominate cycle, wasn't working. Not this time. The audience, usually quick to react, hesitated. Some clapped. Some didn't. And that hesitation, that uncertainty, that was the loudest reaction of all. Because it meant something wasn't landing the way it usually did. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, things were reportedly spiraling. One alleged crew member later claimed that producers were already signaling for a segment wrap, subtle hand gestures, cue cards shifting, a sudden push toward commercial timing. But the conversation didn't naturally slow down. It escalated. Karoline leaned into a point about media narratives, how certain perspectives are amplified while others are dismissed, and suddenly, the conversation wasn't about her anymore. It was about the show itself. And that's when it got dangerous. Because criticizing a topic is one thing. Criticizing the platform you're standing on, that's a whole different level. Whoopi's expression changed again, this time more controlled, more measured, but the edge was there. You could see it in her posture, in the way her hands moved slightly, like she was preparing to regain ground. And she tried. She pivoted. Brought the conversation back to broader themes. But Karoline followed. Every pivot met with a counter. Every redirection met with clarity. And for viewers watching at home, it felt like something rare was happening. Not chaos. Not shouting. But a battle of control. And the control was slipping. Social media picked it up instantly. Clips started trending before the segment even ended. Hashtags exploded. Some praising Karoline for holding her ground. Others defending Whoopi, calling the moment calculated and disrespectful. But the one thing everyone agreed on. Something was off. Because this didn't feel like the usual back and forth. This felt like a moment where the script, whatever that script normally is, wasn't being followed. And then came the moment that insiders are now calling the breaking point. Karoline referenced something, briefly, but clearly, that hadn't been part of the planned discussion. A behind-the-scenes narrative. A critique of how certain conversations are handled off-camera. And just like that, everything froze again. Whoopi didn't laugh. Didn't respond immediately. Didn't deflect. She just stared. And for a split second, the camera caught it. That look. Not anger. Not confusion. Something else. Something that viewers immediately began dissecting online. Because it didn't look like control. It looked like surprise. And that's when producers finally stepped in. The segment cut, slightly earlier than scheduled. A quick transition. A forced shift in tone. But it was too late. The moment had already happened. Clips were everywhere. Replays slowed down. Frame-by-frame analysis. People weren't just watching what was said, they were watching how it was said. The pauses. The eye contact. The reactions. And then, about an hour after the show aired, the real chaos began. Because that's when the leaks started. Anonymous accounts claiming there had been tension before the show even began. Rumors of a pre-interview disagreement. Whispers that certain topics had been off-limits, but still brought up anyway. One viral post even claimed there was a heated exchange backstage immediately after the cameras stopped rolling. No confirmation. No official statement. But the internet didn't wait for proof. It ran with it. And just when people thought the situation couldn't get any more intense, a new clip surfaced. One that wasn't part of the original broadcast. One that showed a moment, brief, almost hidden, where Whoopi leaned toward Karoline during the break and said something no one could quite hear. But Karoline's reaction. That's what set everything on fire. Because she didn't smile. She didn't nod. She didn't disengage. She responded. Quietly. Firmly. And whatever she said made Whoopi lean back. That off-air exchange didn't stay off-air for long. Because within minutes, the whispers turned into something far louder, something that insiders were calling the moment everything cracked. The cameras may have cut to commercial, but the tension didn't reset. It escalated. According to multiple behind-the-scenes accounts that began flooding social media, Karoline Leavitt didn't walk away when the break started. She stayed seated. Calm. Composed. Watching. And that alone reportedly caught Whoopi Goldberg off guard. Because this is where the power dynamic usually flips, guests relax, hosts regroup, producers step in. But this time, none of that worked. One alleged crew member described the atmosphere as ice-cold chaos, claiming producers were rushing in with notes, trying to redirect the next segment, while Whoopi sat unusually still, processing what had just happened. And then, something no one expected. Voices were raised. Not on air. Not loud enough for the broadcast. But loud enough for people nearby to hear. A makeup artist, who later posted anonymously, claimed that Whoopi leaned in and said something along the lines of, "You came here to make a moment." To which Karoline allegedly responded, without hesitation, "No, I came here to finish one." That line. It didn't stay hidden. Within 20 minutes, it was everywhere. TikTok edits. Twitter threads. YouTube shorts replaying that alleged quote like it was gospel. And suddenly, the narrative shifted again. This wasn't just a tense interview anymore. This was a confrontation. A battle of intent. And the internet chose sides instantly. Supporters of Karoline painted her as the one who refused to be steamrolled. Supporters of Whoopi called it a calculated ambush. But behind the scenes, something even more explosive was unfolding. Because while the audience was watching reruns and clips, producers were scrambling. The next segment was supposed to pivot to something lighter, something safe. But according to insider chatter, the room wouldn't reset. Karoline stayed engaged. Whoopi stayed tense. And the co-hosts? They were caught in the middle. One reportedly tried to lighten the mood with a joke. It didn't land. Another attempted to steer the conversation back to neutral ground. Karoline answered, but redirected it right back to the earlier topic. It was like trying to put out a fire that refused to stop spreading. And then came the second explosion. Because just as the show returned from break, something subtle, but devastating, happened. Karoline didn't wait for a question. She spoke first. And what she said wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. But it cut through the room like a blade. She referenced the break. Not directly, but clearly enough that anyone paying attention knew exactly what she meant. A statement about conversations that happen when cameras aren't rolling. A comment about who gets to define fairness in real time versus behind closed doors. And just like that, the tension came roaring back. Whoopi tried to regain control. She jumped in, firm, measured, clearly attempting to reset authority. But this time, something was different. Because Karoline didn't push back emotionally. She dismantled the framing itself. She questioned the premise of the discussion. She reframed the narrative. And suddenly, Whoopi wasn't leading the conversation anymore. She was reacting to it. The audience felt it. You could hear it. That strange, uneven mix of claps, silence, and murmurs that only happens when people don't know how they are supposed to react. And then, just when it seemed like the tension had peaked, the receipts dropped. Not physical papers. Not dramatic props. But references. Specific, undeniable references. Karoline began citing past moments, clips, headlines, statements, that painted a broader picture of how certain voices were treated differently. And here's the twist that sent everything into overdrive. Those moments weren't obscure. They were familiar. Recognizable. The kind of clips people had already seen, but never connected in this way. Within seconds, viewers at home started searching. Pulling up old segments. Rewatching past debates. And the internet did what it always does best. It amplified. Clips resurfaced. Comparisons were made. Side-by-side edits flooded timelines. And suddenly, the conversation wasn't just about one episode anymore. It was about a pattern. A system. A narrative that people either defended or started questioning for the first time. Back in the studio, Whoopi attempted one final pivot. A sharp shift in tone. A return to broader themes. But Karoline didn't follow. She stayed focused. Locked in. And that's when it happened. The moment insiders are calling the silent collapse. Whoopi paused again. Longer this time. No immediate comeback. No quick redirection. Just silence. And in that silence, everything spoke. The audience stopped reacting altogether. The co-hosts went still. Even the camera cuts slowed, as if the production team didn't know where to look. Because for the first time in a long time, there was no clear winner in the room. But there was a clear shift in control. And everyone felt it. Social media erupted again, this time even louder. Did that just happen? Why is no one talking? This feels different. Clips of Whoopi's pause went viral within minutes. Not because of what she said, but because of what she didn't. And then came the third twist. Because while the broadcast continued, a leak hit the internet that no one saw coming. A supposed internal message. Allegedly from someone within the production team. Claiming that the segment had gone completely off script. That producers had attempted multiple times to steer it back. And failed. The message wasn't verified. But it didn't matter. It spread like wildfire. Fueling speculation that what viewers had just witnessed wasn't planned, wasn't controlled, and definitely wasn't supposed to unfold that way. And just as the show began wrapping up, Karoline delivered one final line. Calm. Measured. Unshaken. A statement about conversations people aren't ready for until they are forced to have them. No raised voice. No dramatic pause. Just a sentence. And somehow, it landed harder than everything else. The segment ended. The cameras cut. But the story, it didn't stop. Because what happened after the show is where everything truly explodes. What happened after the cameras shut off didn't stay private. It detonated. Within minutes of the broadcast ending, the studio reportedly turned into a pressure cooker. Staff who were used to routine wrap-ups suddenly found themselves navigating tension so thick it felt staged, but insiders insist it wasn't. It was real, raw, and completely unfiltered. According to multiple alleged leaks, Whoopi Goldberg didn't leave the set immediately. She stayed seated, staring at the table, while producers circled like damage control first responders. That alone was enough to send shockwaves through crew members who had never seen her linger like that. Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt reportedly stood up calmly, gathered her things, and didn't rush out either. She waited. Watched. Almost like she knew something bigger was about to unfold. And then came the confrontation. Not a shouting match. Not chaos. Something colder. One insider claims Whoopi approached Karoline directly and asked, "Was that your plan the whole time?" The tone wasn't explosive, it was sharp, measured, surgical. But what made it hit harder was Karoline's response. "Only if the truth counts as a plan." That line alone allegedly froze the entire backstage area. Now here's where things spiral into something almost unbelievable. Because less than an hour later, a clip surfaced online. Not from the official broadcast. Not from audience footage. But from what looked like a backstage angle. Grainy. Slightly distorted. But unmistakable. The video, quickly labeled the off-camera moment, showed a brief exchange between the two women. You couldn't hear everything clearly, but fragments of audio were enough to set the internet on fire. Phrases like "you crossed a line" and "no, I exposed one" were dissected, slowed down, enhanced, and debated across every platform imaginable. Was it real? Was it edited? No one could confirm. But that didn't stop it from going viral at a speed that made even seasoned media analysts pause. Because now the narrative wasn't just about what happened on TV. It was about what happened when the cameras weren't supposed to matter. And the fallout? Immediate. Fans of Whoopi flooded timelines defending her, calling the moment disrespectful, orchestrated, even a setup. Meanwhile, Karoline's supporters were calling it a turning point, a rare moment of accountability, something long overdue. But here's where it gets even more explosive. Because celebrities started weighing in. Subtle at first. A cryptic tweet here. A vague Instagram story there. But then it escalated. A well-known media personality reposted the clip with the caption, "This is what happens when control meets resistance." Another added, "Daytime TV hasn't looked like this in years." And just like that, the story jumped from trending topic to full-blown cultural moment. Inside the network, panic reportedly set in. Executives were said to be in emergency meetings, reviewing footage, debating responses, trying to figure out how something so controlled could spiral so fast. Because here's the part that insiders say shook them the most. It wasn't just what Karoline said. It was how the audience reacted. Not loud. Not chaotic. But divided. Unpredictable. And that's something daytime TV isn't built for. Then came the rumor that pushed everything into overdrive. A supposed internal memo, leaked anonymously, hinted that the network was considering format adjustments after the incident. No confirmation. No official statement. But the phrasing alone was enough to ignite speculation. Was this about damage control? Or something bigger? Was this just another controversy? Or the beginning of a shift no one saw coming? Meanwhile, both women went silent publicly. No immediate statements. No follow-up interviews. Nothing. And that silence, it made everything louder. Because now people weren't just reacting to what they saw. They were filling in the gaps. Analyzing every frame. Every expression. Every pause. Theories multiplied. Some claimed the entire exchange had been building for weeks. Others insisted it was a one-time clash that spiraled unexpectedly. But one thing became undeniable. The moment had changed something. Not just for the show, but for how people were watching it. And then, just when it seemed like things might start cooling down, a second leak hit. This one even more shocking. An alleged audio recording, clearer than the first clip, began circulating in private groups before spilling into public timelines. And this time, the voices were unmistakable. You could hear Whoopi. You could hear Karoline. And you could hear something else. Not anger. Not chaos. But intensity. The kind that doesn't explode. It simmers. The clip was short. Only a few seconds. But it ended with a line that sent the internet into complete meltdown. This isn't over. No context. No explanation. Just those 3 words. And suddenly, everything felt unfinished. Because if that moment, everything we've just seen, wasn't the end, then what comes next? Say nothing if you want me to continue with the CTA, or just tell me to finish. If you made it this far, then you already know, this isn't just another celebrity moment you scroll past and forget. This is the kind of story that shifts the energy. The kind of moment people will be replaying, debating, dissecting for weeks, maybe even years, because something about it felt different. It didn't feel scripted. It didn't feel controlled. It felt real, raw, and completely unpredictable. And that's exactly why you cannot afford to miss what comes next. Because trust me, this is not over. If even half of these leaks, these clips, these behind-the-scenes whispers are true, then we are watching the beginning of something much bigger than one viral moment. We are talking fallout, responses, possible statements, maybe even more footage that hasn't surfaced yet. So if you're sitting there thinking, I'll catch up later, don't. Later might be too late. Because when the next piece drops, and it will drop, you're going to want to be ahead of it, not scrambling to figure out what everyone else already knows. Hit that like button right now if this moment had you glued to the screen. Drop your thoughts in the comments, because let's be honest, everybody has an opinion on what really went down, and your take might be the one that sparks the next conversation. And most importantly, subscribe. Because this channel doesn't just follow the story, we stay on top of it, we break it down, and we bring you every twist the second it hits. Turn on notifications so you don't miss a single update. Because in situations like this, the silence never lasts long. And when it breaks, it's going to be louder than anything we've seen so far.